Welcome to Questions You Always Wanted to Ask a Rock and Roll Theologian. These are things that bug you, plague you. Maybe you're a believer, but they just gnaw at you, or maybe you can't believe because of some of these issues. So this is a chance to discuss some of those things. And rock and roll theologian just means someone who's on the move in the world, hungry and ambitious, seeking the things of God, pursuing them. The muse is hopefully upon them, or if it's not, they're seeking that muse, and they're willing to break a few rules, I guess. So first question, today's question. What do you say to people who say, you're just a Christian because you were raised that way? If you'd been raised in 7th century Denmark, you'd worship the god Thor. If you were raised in 5th century China, you'd be a Taoist. If you were raised in China today, you'd be an atheist. So I don't really buy into that stuff. It's just all about what you were raised. Your beliefs aren't reliable. It's not true. This is a powerfully intuitive argument. It's like a viscerally powerful argument. And I want to show where it breaks down, how it breaks down. But before I do, I just want to admit, like, this has bugged me as well. And so it's something that is totally valid to be troubled by and to think about. So let's break it down. Every argument or defeater of Christianity or pop culture intuition that seems to be at odds is really an argument with premises, right? And these are the logical steps leading to this conclusion. And oftentimes, premises are hidden or obscured. And when you bring them to light, it can really help make things clear. So this argument really has three premises. Number one, each of us is raised in some kind of a context. A family structure or lack thereof, school system, your moment in the history of the world, your ethnicity, your language, all of those things are part of a context in which each adult was raised. Premise two, contexts have huge force of power to impact our beliefs. Your context either fully determines your belief set or largely influences what you believe. And premise number three, beliefs that are largely determined or wholly influenced are not true. Conclusion, Christianity is not true. So that's roughly the three-step argument. Everybody has a context locked in. You can't go back and change it. Number two, those contexts produce your beliefs. And number three, beliefs that are caused or produced are not valid, reliable, or true. Let's examine this a little bit together. So the first big problem with this argument, which I will call the socialization argument, the first big problem with the socialization argument is that it's at odds with another core belief most of us walk around with, and that is, I do have a pretty large degree of free will. I may not be completely free, but I have a lot of free will. Today, I could choose to go to the beach. I could play pickleball. I could make this video. That's my choice. I'm not just a product of a bunch of forces acting on me to produce where I am. No, I have some free will. But this socialization argument is essentially saying, no, actually you don't. You may think you do, but those forces acted on you and programmed you, and you are a programmed person. So which is it? I think most of us would prefer to believe we have free will. But the problems are much deeper. So let's dig a little bit deeper. Because you see, if it's true that Christian belief is not really valid because it was caused, then that's true for Hindus. That's true for Muslims and Jews. And it's also true for secular humanists, materialists, people who are agnostic, people who are atheists. All of us have a belief set we've come to as adults, and we have a locked-in childhood that we can't go back and change, and the causal structure is set, and we've been programmed. So now some of you are going to say, yeah, but what about me? Because I was raised as a Christian, and I gave up that faith, so I don't fit that category. I want to come back to that, because I do think that is, on the surface, it might seem different, but it's really no different. But now let's go even a little bit deeper. Let's suppose you believe the belief X. X equals socialization argument. You believe the socialization argument is true. That belief, according to the socialization argument, was the result of pre-programmed forces that can't be changed, that have caused you to be who you are today. And now you believe this thing, therefore it's invalid. So that belief is self-referentially incoherent. It knocks itself out. Now, this whole intuition that beliefs are caused are not valid, where does that come from? We have to go to what C.S. Lewis describes as the two senses of the word because, okay? He does this in the book Miracles. He goes deep into it, and that's an amazing book. I highly recommend it. The first sense of the word because is about causation. For example, take this sentence. Esther was late for physics class because the bus broke down. All right, in this scenario, Esther goes to community college. She takes the bus. The bus broke down one day. It took about an hour for the repairs to come. By the time it got fixed, she was, it was about 2:30 when she got to physics class that started at 2. That's causation because. But now let's look at a second sense of the word because. This is the ground consequent version of because. So you might say the number 4 is an even number because it is a whole number evenly divisible by 2 with no remainder. Now, the conclusion that it's an even number has a ground to it, and that is the definition of even numbers is whole numbers evenly divisible by 2 with no remainder. Okay, so that's a ground consequent because. Now let's go back to Esther and physics class. Could we use a because in that sentence that was not causation but ground consequent? Yes. We could say Esther was late for physics class because she arrived at 2:30 and the physics class started at 2. In that sentence, you're referring to a logical relationship between the definition of being late, being at the expected time, and the actual thing that happened. She arrived 30 minutes after the expected time, therefore, logically, she was late. What happens in the socialization argument is that you conflate the two. You say, by explaining the causes, I have explained that it's not true. And in fact, truth is not a function of causes, it's a function of ground consequent kinds of relationships. So think about, I can prove this to you, I think. Think about this idea or this sentence. Cleopatra believes the world is flat because she was raised in 8th century Egypt. And as everyone knows, 8th century Egypt, everyone had this mythology and cosmology that the world was flat. Now consider a separate sentence. Timmy believes the world is round because his parents taught him the world was round, and his school system reinforced that belief. Timmy's 6. Now, if you say, Cleopatra only believes the world's flat because she was raised that way, therefore it's invalid. Timmy also only believes the world is round because his parents raised him that way. He didn't get in an airplane and test the hypothesis that if I go around, the horizon will disappear and eventually I'll arrive where I started, and therefore, no, he was raised that way. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say these beliefs over here that I don't like, they're invalid because they were caused, but the belief that I do like, the world is round, and Timmy did not do any reasoning to get there. He was taught that. Explaining how a belief is caused is not the same thing as explaining if it's true or not. Okay? So that's the thrust of the objection to this argument. As deceptive or seductive or powerful as it seems, it's really not true. But back to my original objection to the objection. What about the person who says, hey, it doesn't apply to me because I was raised as a Christian, but when I hit adulthood, I started thinking for myself, and I came to the conclusion it's not true. Well, there is more subtlety here. Because why did you come to the conclusion it's not true? Well, because when I was in university, I started getting to these classes and these professors who really opened my eyes to a bigger world out there that my parents didn't teach me about. And there was all these troubling ideas about suffering and all this stuff. And then my boyfriend, who was this Christian, was a total jerk, and he broke up with me, and it just exposed the hypocrisy of that whole system. And then 3 other things happened, and now I don't believe Christianity is true. But you see, you could say the same thing. Your causal history led you to reject Christianity, but that's not an explanation of whether it's true or not. And the same thing as any worldview. It's not really that you were raised in it and that now you believe it, therefore it's not true. It's this idea that causation determines the validity of a belief, not ground consequent. That's the problem. But let's go a little deeper. Let's say, yeah, but my beliefs producing mechanism is reliable and yours is not. Taking things on tradition is not a reliable belief producing mechanism. Mine, however, I take tradition, but then I also use logic and science, and I test hypotheses and thesis and counter evidence, and therefore mine is reliable. Yours is called the religious belief producing mechanism. Mine is called the scientific one, or as Tim Keller puts it, proofism. You should only believe in something that can be proved. All of us should only accept beliefs to the extent to which they can be proved, or we should only assign them a strength of belief factor that's equivalent to the degree to which they have been proved or are highly probable. Tim Keller says it's proofism, that system, and philosophers call that foundationalism. The problem with proofism and foundationalism is that, I can't use X because we already used X, but let's say Y equals proofism. That is the belief that you should only accept beliefs that can be proved or accept them to the degree to which they should be proved. Y is not a belief that will be proved by the system of proofism. It can't do it. Proofism will never lead you to Y. And so it's also self-defeating. The truth is that the religious person raised in a Christian family and then hits adulthood and then starts, seeing the whole world and starting to fit things together, they use a combination of faith, reason, memory, imagination, emotion, those 5 things. But guess what? So does the secular humanist. They use a combination of faith that certain things are true, like proofism, reason, emotion, history, memory, imagination. We're complex human beings, and we're always using a combination of all these things to cause our belief structure, right? But again, that has nothing to do with the truth or falsity of a belief. That has to be evaluated another way. Coherence. Does it comport with, like, internal coherence of your belief systems? Does it comport with your experiences in the real world? Is it able to explain the meaning of life? Is it able to explain morality? Is it able to explain purpose? Like, a belief system should be measured not just on the degree to which you feel like it can be proved, because proofism can't be proved. So I hope that's helpful, and we'll come back next time with another objection.